The convoy rolled through the desolate landscape, the rumble of the military trucks reverberating through the dry, cracked earth. The air was thick, heavy with the stench of burned soil, and there was no sign of life. No birds chirped, no trees swayed in the wind, just the barren land stretching out endlessly under the midday sun. The heat felt suffocating, like a constant weight pressing down from above. In the midst of this lifeless world, the soldiers moved in silence, their eyes scanning the horizon, always on alert. At the rear of the convoy walked a German shepherd, his dark coat blending almost seamlessly with the dusty earth. His name was Zeus, and though his body was sleek and muscular, it was his instincts that set him apart from any other. Zeus had been trained to lead, to sniff out danger in ways no human could. The bond between him and his handler, Sergeant Jack Turner, was something beyond words, a connection built on countless missions and shared risks. As the convoy came to a halt, the soldiers disembarked and gathered at a half-collapsed building that had once been a local market. Now, it was little more than a crumbling outpost, reinforced with sandbags and scrap metal. The walls creaked under the weight of time, and the air inside was thick with the smell of sweat, dust, and the hum of communication devices. The soldiers gathered in a tight circle, their faces grim and focused. At the center of the group stood Sergeant Jack Turner. His brow was furrowed in concentration as he scanned the map in front of him. His fingers lightly brushed through his hair, but his mind was already in the field, preparing for the next phase of the mission. Jack wasn't just a handler. He was Zeus's partner. They had been through countless operations together, each one more dangerous than the last. But today, Jack could feel something was different. There was a strange tension in the air, a sense that they were walking into something they couldn't see yet. The commander, a seasoned officer who had seen his share of combat, broke the silence. His voice was steady but sharp as he addressed the team. "We've received intel on enemy activity in the eastern sector. The area has been rigged with landmines. Your job is simple. Clear the path. Zeus will lead." Jack's eyes flicked to Zeus, who was already at attention, his body still but his senses alive and alert. The bond between them was unspoken, yet it was clear to anyone who observed them that Zeus was more than just a dog. He was a soldier, a part of the team, and he had proven time and time again that he could handle the most dangerous of situations. "Stay close," the commander continued, his voice unwavering. "We're counting on you." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the dust of the ruined city with it. The soldiers quickly moved to prepare their gear. Jack adjusted Zeus's harness, making sure the sensors designed to detect mines were securely in place. Zeus gave a soft whine, his nose twitching in the wind, but he remained perfectly still. His eyes, sharp and focused, scanned the surroundings, picking up even the slightest of movements. This was the calm before the storm. As the team began to move out, the sound of boots crunching on gravel filled the air. Zeus led the way, his nose to the ground, every step measured and deliberate. The soldiers followed in tight formation, their eyes scanning the terrain, but their focus was mostly on Zeus. They knew he would lead them safely, just as he had done in the past. The landscape around them was eerily quiet. The earth beneath their feet seemed to shift with every step, the cracked pavement giving the world an unsettling stillness. There was no telling what dangers lay beneath the surface, but Zeus would find them before anyone else. His every move was calculated, each step a testament to the countless hours of training that had gone into preparing him for this moment. Hours seemed to pass as they moved cautiously through the desolate stretch of land. The soldiers were alert, their hands resting on their weapons, their eyes scanning every corner of the landscape. But even as the tension grew, there was something about Zeus that gave Jack a sense of calm. The dog was always in tune with his surroundings, always one step ahead. It was as if Zeus could sense danger before it even arrived, and Jack had learned to trust that instinct. As the convoy moved forward, the air became even heavier. Jack could feel the weight of the mission settling on his shoulders. He had been in many dangerous situations before, But this one felt different. The air was thick with anticipation, and every step they took seemed to lead them closer to something unknown. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Zeus stopped. His head lowered, his nose hovering just above the ground. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He knew what that meant. Zeus had found something. The team froze. Weapons were raised as the soldiers scanned the area, their eyes darting from one corner of the horizon to the next. Jack knelt beside Zeus, his fingers brushing lightly over the earth. He felt the cold, smooth surface of metal hidden beneath the dirt. A landmine, Jack muttered under his breath. The realization hit like a hammer. The first of many dangers had been uncovered. The team's mission had just become far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. "Clear it," the commander said, his voice low but sharp. Jack nodded, his eyes never leaving the spot where Zeus had stopped. Zeus moved closer, his paws light against the earth as Jack carefully worked around the device. The air felt heavier now, every moment stretching into eternity. Jack's hands shook slightly, but his focus never wavered. He could feel Zeus beside him, steady and calm, waiting for the next move. The quiet was deafening, broken only by the occasional crackle of distant radios. Every breath Jack took felt like it was filled with the weight of the mission ahead. As he twisted the device to disarm it, the soft click of success was like a weight lifting from his chest. "Good boy," Jack whispered, his voice barely audible. Zeus wagged his tail, a small acknowledgement of the task completed. But there was no time to relax. The mission was far from over. The team moved forward, with Zeus leading the way, nose to the ground, always alert. The calm before the storm had ended, but the real danger was still ahead. Every step they took felt like it could be their last, and as the wind picked up once more, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something far more dangerous was lurking just beyond the horizon. The convoy pressed forward through the barren wasteland, the soldiers trailing behind Zeus, who led them with unwavering confidence. The landscape around them was a graveyard of broken concrete and charred earth, evidence of past battles that had ravaged the area. The sun hung heavily in the sky, casting a harsh, yellow glow over everything it touched. A sense of unease settled over the soldiers as they moved deeper into the heart of enemy territory, and even the faintest rustle of the wind seemed to bring with it a hint of danger. Sergeant Jack Turner moved with purpose, his eyes never straying far from Zeus. His K-9 partner's movements were as precise as ever, his nose twitching as it caught the faintest hints of danger buried beneath the cracked earth. Jack could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Every step they took felt deliberate, like they were walking in a minefield, unsure of when the next threat would appear. Zeus's sharp gaze swept over the desolate surroundings, his ears flicking back as he searched for any sign of a hidden trap. The German shepherd's body was tense, his every muscle coiled like a spring ready to release. The bond between him and Jack had been forged over countless missions, and there was no one Jack trusted more. But even with Zeus's heightened senses, the unknown dangers ahead felt like a shadow hanging over them. The team moved in tight formation, eyes scanning the ground, hands resting on weapons, but it was Zeus who led them forward, his nose to the ground, searching for anything that might be hidden beneath the surface. The dry, cracked earth beneath them seemed to shift with every step, and Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being washed. His instincts told him that something wasn't right. The silence around them was unnerving, and though the wind rustled through the ruins, there was a palpable sense of waiting, as if the land itself was holding its breath. After what seemed like hours, Zeus stopped suddenly. His body froze, and Jack's heart skipped a beat. He could see it in the way Zeus's head lowered, his nose hovering just above the ground. The dog had found something, and Jack's blood ran cold. The soldiers behind them halted immediately, their weapons drawn, eyes scanning the area for any sign of movement. Jack crouched down beside Zeus, his fingers brushing lightly over the dirt. He could feel the cold metal under his touch before he saw it. A landmine, half buried in the earth. Its gleaming edges caught the sunlight for just a moment, and Jack's breath caught in his throat. He knew they had found the first one. A landmine, Jack muttered under his breath, his voice low and steady. Zeus remained perfectly still, his focus unwavering. He had done his job. Now, it was Jack's turn to do his. The mission had just become much more dangerous than they had anticipated, and there was no turning back. They couldn't afford to make a mistake, not now. The commander's voice cut through the silence. "Clear it." Jack nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He motioned for the team to keep their distance, and they obeyed, stepping back to give him space. The air around them felt thicker now, the dust in the wind swirling in small gusts that made it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. Jack's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the delicate wires on the side of the landmine, careful not to disturb the device any more than necessary. "Easy, boy," Jack whispered to Zeus as he adjusted the straps of the dog's harness. Zeus's eyes never wavered, his gaze fixed on the task at hand, his body tense and alert. Jack could feel the dog's presence beside him, a steadying force amidst the chaos. They had been through worse, and they would get through this together, just like always. As Jack worked on disarming the mine, the rest of the team remained still, watching with bated breath. The minutes stretched out like hours, each movement Jack made feeling as though it would be his last. The quiet was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of the radios and the occasional rustle of the wind. Jack's mind was razor-sharp, every sense heightened as he focused on the task at hand. The mine was dangerous, but Jack knew the procedure. He had done this countless times before. But there was still something gnawing at the back of his mind. Something didn't feel right. The landmine clicked as Jack disabled the fuse. The sound was like a brief exhale of relief, but it didn't last long. Zeus barked, his tail wagging once, as if to acknowledge their success, but there was no time for celebration. They had a job to finish. Jack stood up slowly, wiping the sweat from his brow. He glanced over at Zeus, who had already moved ahead, his nose once again to the ground. The team moved forward, but the weight of what had just happened hung heavily on their shoulders. The landscape ahead seemed to stretch out before them, empty and silent, as if it were waiting for something to happen. Jack could feel it in his bones, the feeling that they were walking into something far more dangerous than they had prepared for. Zeus was the first to move, his paws light against the cracked earth as he led the team onward. The soldiers followed closely behind, their eyes scanning the ground, their bodies tense with anticipation. Jack kept his gaze fixed on Zeus, trusting the dog's instincts more than his own. As they moved further into the heart of enemy territory, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The quiet was suffocating, and every step seemed to lead them closer to an unknown danger. There were no sounds of enemy movement, no indication that they were being followed. But Jack knew better than to trust silence in a place like this. It was the calm before the storm. And then, just as quickly as the silence had settled in, the ground beneath them shook. The explosion was deafening, a shockwave of force that rattled their bones and sent them crashing to the ground. Dust and smoke filled the air, obscuring everything for a moment. Zeus barked once, a fierce, protective growl that echoed in the chaos, but he didn't move toward the explosion. He stood his ground, his body tense, his eyes scanning the smoke-filled landscape. The soldiers scrambled to their feet, weapons raised, but the damage had already been done. The explosion had rocked them to their core, and Jack's mind raced as he tried to piece together what had happened. They were under attack, but from where? And more importantly, who had triggered the blast? As the smoke cleared, Jack's eyes narrowed. Zeus had found something. And it wasn't just a landmine. It was something worse, something far more deadly than they had anticipated. The real threat was just beginning to reveal itself. The air was thick with dust, swirling around the soldiers as they tried to regain their bearings. The explosion had been deafening, a sharp shockwave that rattled the ground beneath them. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he scrambled to his feet, eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. The smoke from the blast still hung heavy in the air, a gray shroud that made it difficult to see. The faint smell of burnt metal and scorched earth mixed with the acrid scent of smoke, filling Jack's nostrils. He quickly checked the team, his eyes darting from one soldier to the next. No one appeared injured, but the tension was palpable. They had been thrown off balance by the explosion, and now they were on high alert. But something wasn't right. Jack could feel it deep in his gut, an instinct he had learned to trust over years of service. This was no ordinary attack. There was something more lurking in the shadows, waiting for them to make a mistake. Zeus was already ahead of them, his powerful body cutting through the dust like a shadow. His keen eyes were focused on the landscape, scanning every inch of the ruined city as if he were looking for something that was just out of reach. Jack's gaze followed the dog, his mind working quickly. They had been through so many close calls before, but this felt different. Zeus had never acted like this, not once. As the team regrouped, the quiet seemed to swallow them up. The faint rustle of the wind through the broken buildings was the only sound, punctuated by the occasional crackle of the radio. The landscape around them was a maze of twisted metal, shattered concrete, and rubble. It was a place where death could be hidden in every corner, and even the slightest movement could signal danger. And Jack knew that if they weren't careful, they wouldn't make it out alive. Zeus stopped in his tracks, his body stiffening as he sniffed the air. His ears flattened against his head, and his body trembled with barely contained tension. Jack could see it in the way the dog's muscles were coiled, ready to spring into action. Zeus was sensing something that no one else could see, something that was far more dangerous than they had anticipated. Jack felt his breath catch in his throat. "Hold up," Jack said softly, his voice steady but filled with urgency. The team immediately stopped, their eyes turning to him for direction. Jack's focus was on Zeus, whose gaze was fixed ahead, his body tense, but unmoving. There was no sound, no movement, just the eerie silence of a city that had long been abandoned. Jack crouched down beside Zeus, his fingers brushing through the dirt, his mind racing. He had trained with the dog for years, but there were times when Zeus's instincts were sharper than anything Jack could comprehend. The dog had found things before, landmines, hidden explosives, and threats they could never have imagined. But this was different. Zeus was acting as if he sensed something far beyond the reach of their senses. "Zeus," Jack whispered, his voice low and calm. He rested his hand on the dog's back, his fingers brushing through the dog's thick fur. Zeus's body relaxed slightly at the touch, but his eyes remained fixed on the distance. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. They had to find out what Zeus was sensing before it was too late. The ground around them shifted slightly as the wind picked up again, blowing a cloud of dust into the air. It was as though the city itself was shifting, changing, watching them. Jack looked around, but there was no movement, no sign of the enemy. The soldiers were all tense, their weapons raised, eyes darting to every corner of the ruined buildings, scanning for any signs of danger. Zeus's growl was soft at first, barely audible above the wind, but it grew louder, more insistent, as if the dog was warning them about something. Jack's instincts screamed at him to move, to do something before it was too late. He had never seen Zeus this alert, this focused. The dog was acting as though he had detected a presence, something far worse than a landmine or enemy troops, something that was lurking, hidden beneath the surface, waiting to strike. Without warning, Zeus lunged forward, a blur of motion as he darted ahead, his nose pressed to the ground. Jack barely had time to react as the dog moved with incredible speed and precision. The soldiers behind Jack moved into formation, their eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger, but they were too slow to catch up to Zeus. "Zeus, wait!" Jack shouted, but the dog was already too far ahead. The team followed cautiously, but the dust made it hard to see more than a few feet in front of them. Jack pushed forward, his heart racing as he closed the distance between him and the dog. He had no idea what Zeus had found, but he knew it couldn't be good. The dog had never acted this way, not in all the years they had worked together. There was a sense of urgency in the air now, and electricity that hummed beneath the ground. The wind carried a faint scent, one Jack couldn't identify, but it sent a chill down his spine. As Jack approached Zeus, he saw the dog freeze again. His body was still, his ears flattened against his head. Zeus was staring at something, his eyes locked onto a spot just ahead. Jack's pulse quickened as he crouched down beside the dog. What had Zeus found? There, partially buried in the rubble, was a trap unlike any Jack had ever seen before. It was hidden beneath the dust, almost invisible, but Zeus's keen senses had uncovered it. The device was smaller than a landmine, but its design was far more intricate, sophisticated, deadly. It was a trap designed to catch them off guard, to lure them in and then strike when they least expected it. Jack's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the danger. This wasn't just an ordinary landmine. This was something far worse. The enemy had been waiting for them, using the city's ruins as a perfect hiding place for their traps. Jack could feel the weight of the situation press down on him. They weren't just fighting against enemy soldiers. They were fighting against something far more insidious, something that was hidden beneath the surface, waiting to destroy them all. "Everyone, back," Jack ordered, his voice sharp and commanding. The team immediately pulled back, their eyes fixed on the trap in front of them. Jack stayed where he was, his focus on Zeus, who was still watching the trap with unwavering attention. The bond between Jack and the dog was unbreakable, and in moments like this, Jack knew that Zeus's instincts were the only thing that could keep them alive. Jack's mind raced as he surveyed the scene. The trap was far more complex than anything they had prepared for, but they couldn't afford to be careless. They had to act quickly, or they would all be in grave danger. "Zeus," Jack whispered, his voice low. The dog looked up at him, and for a brief moment, there was a silent exchange between them. Zeus knew what had to be done. Jack only hoped he could do his part. The stillness in the air was suffocating. The dust had settled just enough for Jack to see the trap more clearly, and his heart skipped a beat as his eyes scanned it with intensity. This wasn't an ordinary threat. The weapon was sophisticated, designed to blend in perfectly with the surroundings, something that could only be set by someone who knew the land and how to manipulate it. It was a deadly reminder of how dangerous the enemy was. Intelligent, calculating, and relentless. Zeus stood perfectly still beside Jack, his nose twitching slightly, his eyes locked on the trap as if he could sense its malicious intent. Jack felt the weight of their mission more than ever. They were standing at the crossroads of life and death, and it was a moment that would change everything. "We need to move fast," Jack muttered under his breath. He could feel the tension in the air tightening around him like a vice, but there was no time to hesitate. The soldiers behind him were already preparing, ready to respond to his commands. But Jack knew the first decision needed to come from him. It always had, just like with Zeus. He trusted the dog more than anyone else. But now, Jack had to make a choice that could mean the difference between life and death. "Clear the area. Step back slowly, but stay sharp," Jack ordered, his voice calm yet firm. The team obeyed immediately, retreating several paces without question. The air around them felt heavier, charged with the potential of what could happen next. Every soldier held their breath as they watched Jack and Zeus, knowing they were on the edge of something bigger than just a routine minefield. Zeus, for his part, was unwavering, his attention fixed solely on the trap ahead. The dog's muscles were coiled, tense, and every fiber of his being seemed to be in sync with the earth beneath them. Zeus could feel the trap, not just with his keen senses, but with a deep, intuitive understanding of the land around him. There was an almost eerie calmness about the dog, even though they were surrounded by danger. Jack knew this moment was pivotal. He glanced at the trap once more. It was intricately designed, delicate yet powerful, ready to explode if triggered by even the slightest disturbance. Jack's thoughts raced. He had disarmed dozens of mines before, but this was no ordinary landmine. It was a carefully set ambush, a trap that would detonate with an enormous force. They had to act quickly and precisely, or they would lose everything. Jack slowly reached for his radio, signaling to the rest of the team to stay back. He couldn't risk any mistakes now. His gaze shifted from the trap to Zeus, who seemed to sense the gravity of the situation. Jack could see it in the dog's eyes. A silent understanding passed between them. Zeus was ready. Jack had no doubt about that. But something was nagging at him. Zeus had always been the first to charge ahead, the first to make a move when danger loomed. But this time, something felt different. Zeus's usual enthusiasm was replaced with an almost eerie caution. The dog's body remained tense, his growl low and constant, his eyes flickering to Jack, as if silently communicating his concerns. Jack's instincts screamed that they weren't just dealing with a mine. No, this was something far worse, something the enemy had set for them, something personal. The realization hit Jack like a blow to the chest. The enemy wasn't just trying to kill them. They were toying with them, setting traps, playing games with lives, and they had used Zeus as bait. The thought made Jack's stomach churn, but he had no time to dwell on it. There was no turning back. Not now. Jack moved toward Zeus, his heart heavy in his chest. "Stay with me, boy," he whispered, his voice steady but filled with emotion. The bond between them, forged over years of shared hardships, was unbreakable. Zeus had been there for him in the darkest of times, and now it was Jack's turn to return the favor. He knelt beside the dog, his hand resting on Zeus's back. For a moment, everything else faded away. There was only Jack and Zeus, and the trust that had carried them through every mission, every danger, every loss. The team was ready. They had formed a perimeter around the area, but the trap still loomed ominously in the center, a constant reminder of how close they were to disaster. Jack took a deep breath and looked at Zeus. The dog had lowered his body slightly, preparing to move. Then it happened. In a blur of motion, Zeus darted forward, moving faster than Jack could react. The dog's instincts had kicked in, his body propelling him toward the trap with a singular purpose. Jack's heart stopped. He shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the deafening sound of the explosion that followed. The world seemed to slow down in those terrifying moments. The ground shook violently, and a wave of heat and force tore through the air, sending Jack flying backward. The smoke and dust swallowed everything. He couldn't see, couldn't hear. All he could feel was the burn of the blast and the deafening silence that followed. The moment the smoke cleared, Jack scrambled to his feet, his ears ringing from the explosion. His mind raced, but his body moved on pure instinct. He pushed through the haze, his eyes desperately searching for Zeus. He could barely see, the dust still hanging thick in the air. But there, just ahead, was the dark shape of his dog. Zeus. Jack's voice cracked as he rushed forward, stumbling through the wreckage of the ruined city. He reached the dog's side, his heart pounding painfully in his chest. Zeus lay motionless on the ground, his body still and lifeless. Jack's breath caught in his throat. "No, no, no, no," Jack whispered, dropping to his knees beside Zeus. His hands trembled as he gently placed his fingers on the dog's chest, desperately hoping for any sign of life. But there was nothing. The dog who had protected him, who had stood by him through every battle, every challenge, was gone. The pain in Jack's chest was unbearable. It felt as though his heart had been ripped out. He had failed his partner, the one being who had never failed him. The grief hit him like a freight train, and he collapsed beside Zeus, tears mixing with the dust and dirt. "I'm so sorry, Zeus," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I couldn't save you." The rest of the team gathered around, their faces solemn, their eyes filled with the same grief that Jack felt. There was no more mission, no more steps forward, only the silence and the weight of the loss. Zeus had given everything, even his life, for them. And in return, they would remember him, not just as a dog, but as a hero, a soldier who had fought beside them until the very end. Jack stood slowly, his eyes fixed on the still form of his fallen partner. The team stood in silence, their heads bowed, paying tribute to the hero who had saved them all. Jack reached down, gently brushing the fur on Zeus's neck one last time, before giving the dog a final, heartfelt salute. "We will carry your legacy," Jack whispered, his voice firm once again. "We will never forget you, Zeus." And as the dust settled around them, they moved on, the weight of the sacrifice heavy on their shoulders. But they knew, deep in their hearts, that they would finish what Zeus had started, no matter the cost.